Subscribe to Simply Bitcoin.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome in. You made it to another episode of the Meme Factory Stream Test. This is Stream Test number 139, and this evening we are joined by Bob Burnett and Steve Barbour. Guys, say hi. It's good to have you both back on.
Well, guys, nice to have us.
Yeah.
Glad to be back.
Thank you. Yep. Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world.
All right, so I'm going to ask you guys real quick. So for anybody who doesn't know you, I want to see if you guys could both introduce yourselves with your background in the space and how you got into the mining space. Keep it short and sweet. Bob, if you want to start, go for it.
All right. Bob Burnett. I am the CEO of Barefoot Mining. We've been in the mining business since 2017. Had a whole career before that in the personal computer industry, most notably with Gateway, where I was the chief technical officer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Steve Barbour, and I guess I got this new product. Should I introduce, or is that later?
If you want to roll with it, that's perfect. We were going to do it after that.
We'll wait for that. It's just so the audience is excited.
Yeah.
I'm the owner of Upstream Data. I started, I guess, the journey when I bought a Gecko Science USB stick miner in 2016. That's how I first started learning about the industry. But it was an effort to figure out how to do it to start my company, and we are 7 years later building stuff.
Nice. Thank you, Steve. And then, as you mentioned, we have an ad for a new product to show. So, in an effort to get us all paid today, if you could run through it, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Barbour, and tonight's episode of the Meme Factory Stream Test is brought to you by my new product, Steve Barbour's Barbour Parlor. It's quite the mouthful. Are you dealing with long stranded hair at your stranded energy site? Well, you're in luck, because Steve Barbour's Barbour Parlor is the containerized clipper crypt you didn't know you needed. From fracking fields to faraway fjords, Steve's sensational streamlined shipping shop can drop in anywhere. Yes, you heard right. Steve Barbour's Barbour Parlor brings fresh fades to remote rigs and frigid fracking facilities. All in a barbershop packed in a box that you can pop down anywhere. With Steve's magic touch, you mine Bitcoin while providing trimming treatments, buzzing beards, and untangled tousled hair, as you can see. So whether you're harvesting stranded watts or chopping curls in the wilderness, Steve Barbour's Barbour Parlor is your hairy harbor of hope. You bring the stranded energy, Steve brings the scissors. You'll be scissoring with your employees. Cutting stranded hair and making mining magic. Call now or miss out on the most bewilderingly brilliant barbershop this side of Bitcoin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That
Well
was
done,
wonderful.
Yeah, you got me there, man.
That was a good one.
That's a great product. I think it's it's needed out there.
Maybe I got a radio voice, but not a TV face.
Nah, I mean that's hop into a barber parlor and get that thing cleaned up,
Wow.
All right, so Steve, I'll give you a break. You did great, man. Thank you.
Love it, as always.
So, Bob, you're involved in running a mining pool, and the reason I wanted to get you guys both here together is because there's been a lot of talk about, especially recently, mining pool centralization and the problems that are there. I want to start with if Bob, you can explain how mining pools work at like a high level and why they're necessary for smaller operations in particular.
Sure. All right. Well, there are approximately 6 million systems out there in the world trying to mine right now. And each year there's only 53,000 blocks. So that gives any individual machine, what would that be? Less than 1% chance of finding a block. So given that, if you're out there mining and you're trying to do it by yourself, you could easily go years or decades without, if you're, let's say, a guy with one machine, you could go years or decades without actually winning a block, and therefore you'd never get paid. So pools were created to share that risk, to almost like an insurance policy in reverse, in a way, like that if I have a machine and you have a machine, well, if we form a pool and I can say, well, I'll share half of my money with you and you share half of my money, your money with me, if one of us wins, and and obviously that scales. So pools allowed miners to normalize their revenue stream at the end of the day. So, and I will say, as a miner at a commercial level, most of our expenses come in 30-day windows. So we have to pay most of our bills, our big ones, our rent, our utility costs, those come in 30-day windows. Most of the rest of the stuff, really, the only other thing is labor that comes, for, in our case, twice a month. So we need to be sure that the cash flow that we need comes inside those windows, and pools allow us to accomplish that.
All right, thank you. And then Steve, you were more involved with like stranded energy and making these rigs that are basically hot droppable at location, where people can start firing up a generator off of flare gas or any other combustible material, essentially, and start mining.
Like air clippings, yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So how do you think this approach affects or impacts the decentralization of Bitcoin mining compared to, say, traditional methods?
Like the approach of just pooling hash rate?
Uh,
Or
the,
the approach of, our approach of distributed modular units
exactly.
for decentralization? Well, I mean, I would say that Bitcoin is reasonably decentralized when it comes to like ownership of computers. And so I can say that I'd like to think, and I think we do, like decentralize mining from that standpoint, because our customer base, especially in the oil field, while we do have big customers, we do have a lot of little ones with little operations. And you see that maybe more with our kind of application than you would see with utility power. Utility power projects, you often just see usually bigger sites, right, to get the economies of scale to get better power deals. Whereas with stranded gas and waste gas, this gas is effectively worthless, and people can buy our product. If you're affiliated with the oil company, you can deploy the product. And I would say, we have a lot of small customers, some big ones, but maybe it's a bit more conducive, like this off-grid mining, to decentralized ownership of hardware. But ownership of hardware, I've never really seen as a problem in the, call it, discussion around centralization anyway. Because I would say over time, hardware ownership has been generally broadening over time. Like more and more people are getting into it. Not to say that there hasn't been, lots of M&A happening and big companies swallowing up, struggling companies and acquiring more and more hash rate themselves. But I've never really seen centralization risk a problem when it comes to energy distribution or hardware distribution in the Bitcoin market. So whether or not we're helping that, I don't know if it's a big problem to begin with, but
I'd push back on that a little bit. I'd say that your product in particular does a really good job helping miners not centralize geographically.
That's rude. Pushing back.
Depends on the situation.
Kind of rude.
All right, so we here in the Twitter sphere, there's that centralization. It's a big problem. So I want to hear from both of you, like whether or not centralization of the mining pools is a real threat to Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem, and then where does that threat stem from these days, and is there anything we can do about it?
Well, I'll answer that. Let me follow up on the previous point too a little bit. I think that as time goes by, the geographic diversity I'm not concerned about it either. I guess I'll support Steve in that. I think it will become even more diverse, though, and that I think we're going to see more and more activity off grid, and a lot of that's going to be gas related, stranded gas, flared gas, biogas, like all those sort of things. I think are a big part of the future, and I think there's a massive opportunity in, I think you've heard me talk about this before, what I call horse class mining, but you can think of it simply as the small to medium sized commercial mines, which could be a few hundred kilowatts to a few megawatts. And I actually think that's where the greatest economic advantage is there as well. Steve alluded to it, but you can find free or close to free sources of the gas out there. So there's capital costs in generators and of course operating costs and maintenance, but there's a lot of stuff out there that really can only be utilized for Bitcoin. And the guys that are pursuing the big stuff, the big name brands out there in the mining space, they're now in a position where they have to fight the AI world, the HPC world. There's not as many 50, 100, 200 megawatt spots sitting on the grid where they're underutilized. A lot of that's been captured. And as this price compression is occurring, I think it'll continue to get harder and harder for those guys. Their long lead time to kind of build out sites is a disadvantage as well. It takes, forever. And Steve, you can comment on it too, but we can, with the right things happen, we can deploy in a month, right? We can be up and going in a month and instead of 18 months. And
yeah. And the small commercial side, there are pockets where you get pretty good power rates, and you might get some preferable like good rates with a co-op. And we still sell a lot of like these smaller hash hut products, like these smaller Bitcoin mining products, and even black boxes to these very distributed. I don't know if they're horses or rabbits. I can't remember the analogy scale.
Rabbits are the real little ones, but they could be
like anywhere between like 50 to 200 kilowatt. We still build a lot of that stuff. We've always done really well with that. And one thing that I really like about that customer base is that all these customers are starting small, but that doesn't mean they're going to stay small, and a lot of them do end up scaling. And so in that sense, like we're the product line that fits that niche, which we've always focused on having that product line. And I haven't seen as much from other, call it competitors on that like scale. It does a lot for the educational side of Bitcoin by, getting a lot of people into it that can afford to get into that scale. And that's important. I mean, that will grow the network in the long term. So we're very proud of the, supporting that customer base that like that need. But we got really cool projects where guys have small solar arrays that they built for some reason, but then, they come to the realization, hey, I got this sunk cost. Like, what else can we do? And they go buy a black box or a small hash hut and drop it in. And those are great applications because, the infrastructure's there and there's no additional upfront infrastructure tie-in that many applications will need. So it can be very rapid deployment and in some cases really cheap power for those applications. So
yeah, I can even say
those are indeed everywhere.
Yeah, we actually have we have a small site that we help build out with an orchard greenhouse in northern Florida, and we use some of Steve's black boxes that sit strategically actually around the greenhouse, and they can and this guy also has solar there too, so he's got a lot of solar producing a fair amount of his own energy. And when he either needs heat or he needs to reduce humidity inside the greenhouse, then he vents into the greenhouse. If not, he just sits there and runs, right? Just lets it go into the atmosphere. But those kind of applications, I think, are becoming more and more common. We had a call earlier today from somebody that we're looking at a partnership with where they need to heat some water as part of the brewing process, part of the beer brewing process. So, we're talking about doing that sort of stuff. So those kind of things I think are very cool. And they really, to Steve's point too earlier, like those sort of things really decentralize the hardware component. And I don't think that's that's not a big concern. Maybe the centralization of the ASIC itself, the chip manufacturer, I'd certainly like to see changes in that. But
Yeah.
in terms of how the hardware itself is distributed, not really a big problem.
Yeah,
I'm
I
curious,
personally think
right?
there's more of a problem in, the manufacturing side of things, as well as the pool side of things, than there is in the hardware ownership and energy ownership.
Yeah.
I think Marcus had a question about the chips.
Yeah, not so much the chips. I heard you mention there's about like 6.5 million systems, as in miners out there. I was wondering how
Roughly.
you arrived at that number. Is that like based on hash rate or?
Well, I've done some pretty extensive studies on it, but you could back into it yourself pretty easily if you just say, well, there's let's say there's 650 exahashes of computing power out there, and you take an average rig at like 104 terahashes per second or something on that order,
Right.
and there you go. Let's say
Yeah.
that's just very easy. 600 exahashes, 100 terahashes per second. That's 6 million units.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any idea about, so obviously it won't be like 6.5 million owners because some of you guys have like massive amounts. Any idea on a number of how many operators you would come to?
Well, I mean, it's a really small sample size. I'm part of the Ocean Group, which is what Greg talked about before, and we published this stat on the site. But there's about 650 different accounts registered on that site. I have a feeling if you looked at a lot of the smaller pools, and smaller is a little bit of a relative word, but let's say you look at what Brains might have, or what trying to think of some of the off the top of my head. For some reason I'm drawing a blank.
Slush pool, F2 pool.
Fluxer, yeah.
Well, those are the big
Pool.
ones. The big ones are going to have a much different ratio of number of users to the hash rate. So in other words, if like we're averaging lately about 2 exahashes with 650 miners contributing to that. Now, a couple guys make up like over half of it, and then the rest. So there's probably like
I would guess like Bob's right. There's somewhere between like 5 and 6 million or more active individual machines, but I would guess there's in the tens to hundreds of thousands of individual people owning those machines.
Yeah.
I would hope more than 100,000, but it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if you're talking like, and obviously like the BitAxe project, which I really like, I mean, if you limit on how much hash rate qualifies as an owner, I mean, you could knock off a lot of different owners based on the
Steve,
level.
I want to interrupt you. Could you describe what a BitAxe is? I think probably a lot of people still don't know.
Well, BitAxe is an open source project, I think led by a gentleman named Scott, SKOT on Twitter. But it's effectively an open source miner I think they're using Antminer chips, but they've come out with, there's a lot of contributors. It's all, no one's, it's effectively nonprofit, but people are contributing to the hardware spec and the source code and everything, so that basically you can build your own Bitcoin miner if you can procure the hardware. It's a really cool project, and one of the best things about it that I think is not talked about enough is how much, what I sort of alluded to earlier. Like, I started this company that's now 7 years running. I think we've been reasonably successful off a stick miner. If it wasn't for that stick miner, I wouldn't have learned what I need to learn. And I might not have taken the next step. Those BitAxe, this open source project, I think it does a wonderful job educating people on the fundamentals of Bitcoin mining. It's not so much about decentralizing hash rate, which I think it gets a lot of good press on, which is good, but what it does is decentralizes and broadens knowledge and understanding, and that is incredibly powerful, I think, and that's why I really support that project.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I'm a huge fan of that project. I got to know Scott a little bit, sat on a few panels with Scott at different, Bitcoin events. They're doing good stuff. I will say this is an interesting thing. I am involved also with a group developing our own ASIC. So we have an effort to develop our own ASIC. And one of the interesting things when you talk to a guy like Scott or anybody, a FutureBit folks or somebody like that, is that Steve's correct. What they're doing is they're basically recycling parts off of defunct boards, right? You pretty much have to take a hash board that failed, and then you're pulling chips off of that board. And these guys that did these projects, they don't get any specs published from like Bitmain or MicroBT or any of the other people that they might be trying to recover them from. So they have to kind of reverse engineer everything about that chip to try to figure out how to get it to work again. And it's very different than I mentioned. I came from the personal computer industry. When we bought a chip from Intel, we would get a data book, a thick data book, and it would tell us everything about it, what every pin did, what the timings were, what the voltages were, all that sort of stuff. And we do lack that. To me, that's a big effort. It's part of why I'm part of this group to try to go design a new ASIC, is to give the market something that is done it wouldn't be open source, but it would be an open book, I guess. Like, here's a chip, anybody can design anything they want with it. You want to design an enterprise class mining server, great. You want to do a FutureBit, you want to try to turn it into integrate it with a pool heater or whatever, we'll sell you the chip, and here's the data book and all the specs, and off you go. And I think that's very important for the industry. We can't, I don't know, 80 to 90% of all the chips come from one company. And that bothers me. I don't like that.
Didn't Intel try to start up something and then they quit? I mean,
they did.
Like
they actually produced
second.
chips. They actually produced chips. We have a few running. They did abandon it. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be shocked if they came back someday. I think if Bitcoin is as successful as we think it will be, they'll be back. But they're, like I said, I'm working on one. We have Blockstream, we have Block, we have Chain Reaction. There's several others. Hopefully, a lot of these other projects will do as I just said, that they'll open it up. So even though they're my competitors, I want them all to come. Like I want them to be successful.
So I wanted to back it up to the pools again. Bob, you obviously have some intimate knowledge. You've started up a fairly new pool with Ocean, and it's small but growing. What kind of hurdles are you having to jump to compete with the big boys? And then what kind of incentives are you fighting against on their end? I want to hear from both of you on that. Like, what does a miner look for in their pool, and why would they choose a big one over a small one, or vice versa?
Well, selling to the guys that possess a lot of hash rate is hard. These are some of the big hurdles. I'm sure I'll forget some. One is they have established relationships and contracts, usually at obscenely low prices. That's one thing people should know. Like if you're out there and you're a small miner and you're paying 2% fees, the big boys could be paying anywhere from a negative fee to a small fee, depending on the situation. It's not unprecedented, at least in periods of time, for there even to be a small rebate to some of the big guys. So that's one hurdle, is just economic. The second hurdle is a lot of the big pools have things like SOC 2 compliance, which is a it's like a privacy sort of thing. They're public companies, so they'll basically have I'll simplify it. They'll have compliance concerns. They'll have reporting concerns. They'll need approval from an outside auditor. They'll have all these sort of things that make it very, very difficult to get them to change. And in fact, sometimes it's so extreme that as we've approached some of the big companies and said, hey, will you just give us a try? Will you take 5 units and turn it on and kind of play with it? And they say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. We can't even do that. Even though they might have 30,000 machines in their control, they can't take 5 and go play with a pool that hasn't been through the whole freaking process. So,
are you guys getting your SOC 2 certification there, Bob?
We're working on it, but we're a non-KYC pool, and
It's gonna be difficult, yeah.
It gets a little funky because there is no registration, right? So what Steve's asking about is like when you sign up for Ocean, all you do is you tell us the wallet address that you want payouts to go to, and you point your miner at the pool, and that's it. So there's no KYC process. And because in most cases, most of the coins are not custodied by the pool. So in other words, in a normal pool, I should say a normal pool, but most pools today, if the pool wins a block, the money goes into a common account, and then at a later point gets distributed to the members of the pool. And in Ocean, if you're above a certain size, you get paid directly from the Bitcoin transaction from the Coinbase. So anyway, it kind of breaks the rules. So what you're saying is it kind of breaks the rules. They don't know how to handle that. So those are, some of the big things. But at the end of the day, too, I think what I would say is, in general, the things that at least Ocean is trying to promote, this transparency, like direct payment from the Coinbase, all these sort of things, they're not very high on the checklist of the big companies, at least at this point. Those are not very high. And because the pool is small, there's some inconsistency in the payout. We had, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think in July we had a poor month, and we had I think we won 8 blocks, and then in August we won 12. Those are pretty radical different payout possibilities. And as long as, so in the long run, it doesn't matter. The luck will be the luck, and it will all even out. But in short windows, it can get rocky. Now, the bigger the hash rate gets, so it's a little self-fulfilling too. So the bigger the pool gets, the less variability there is. But as it's still small, you can do the math, right? So if it's 2 exahashes of whatever you want to believe global hash is, let's just say 600 to keep the math simple, it means it's 1/3 of 1% of the world's hash rate, which means you'd win a block about every 3 days. You should, roughly.
Like there's a block about every 10 minutes.
Yeah. But you could go 7, you could go 11, and then you could win 3 in 12 hours. And those are, by the way, really happened to us. Both of those scenarios. I think we went 11 days once without winning one, and then won 3 in 18 hours and 5 in 30 hours, or something like that.
It's funny. I was talking to last time Adam O was on the show. He works with Steve at Upstream. At least I think he still does, right, Steve?
Oh, Adam Denver Bitcoin?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. So
they said Adam Lowe. Adam O. Yeah.
Adam O.
Yeah.
So he, I had a stupid idea with him that he chided me for, but I'm going to keep bringing it up. I think there are lucky miners, and I think if you guys can isolate the ones that find the blocks, you should put them in their own room and never turn them off.
Oh, that's the first I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he told me.
I don't know how many lucky ones I've had, but I'll make sure I keep trying.
Well, here's the thing. It's a kind of it doesn't really matter economically, but it's a fun thing about Ocean is we identify the specific miner and none of the other pools will tell you. So you just know the pool one, but with Ocean, you know. So I don't want to disclose exactly how many were mine because I don't want the world to know exactly how much hash rate I have, which you could, but we've won several, and we have a sticker that goes on them. Like they're all like very special, honored. You know, we bow to them every morning.
Exactly.
When we
You know,
enter
I won a block, my personal S9. And the reason I know this, and to what Bob said, very few pools over, like, since I started, since 2016, actually indicate who won the block in the pool. I used to mine on CK Pool, the open, the free pool he did, not the solo one, but the actual pool one.
Right.
And they only won a couple blocks, and I won one of those. It was in my garage.
Yeah.
And you can, the excitement when you actually see that your miner, because I knew it because it was my address.
Yeah.
And I have that basically carved on the wall because I was hopping excited. I told my business partner, who doesn't really understand Bitcoin, he's like, "Oh, we won a lot of money." I'm like, "No, it's shared with the pool, but
Yeah.
on a block." So it's pretty exciting. And, you know, it's been interesting seeing over the years, like, you know, I would consider that I didn't get in that early, at least early, to see the development of the evolution of pools, because they changed a lot even up to, you know, when they started, I think in like 2011, or I think it was 2011 that Slush Pool and Luke Jr. launched.
Yeah.
And then evolved up till 2016 when I started looking at the space. But, you know, it's been interesting to watch it since then, because even in 2016, there were several options. I think Allegius had just shut down, or shortly before I sort of got involved.
Yeah.
There was a lot of options like what Ocean is today, where anyone can connect to Ocean with their simply an address. It's very low effort, low overhead to connect. There's basically no surveillance on their customers, no KYC, no data collection really. I mean, Bob, you guys probably have to log IPs and stuff, but that stuff can be, if you're a security conscious user, you can, you know, VPN or do what you want to do.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, you know, as the market has matured, everything's industrialized, it's gone public. There's whole new pressures on the mining pool ecosystem that didn't quite exist back even when I started not so long ago. And that is KYC requirements. These guys are public companies. That's why pools like Luxor, probably, I would imagine Brains will start doing this if they haven't already, but have to get SOC 2 certified, at least for a subset of the users that require it, because they're just not going to mine there. Like, they're not going to, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, Bob, for Ocean to attract these public miners without that certification that that their auditors are going to require from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless something
Absolutely.
dramatically changes in the system, like, I don't know, the entire market starts block withholding those pools and bankrupting them, which I would not advocate for. But, you know, that's just the nature of that aspect, how privacy has slipped away in mining pools.
Yeah.
And of course, mining pools have also evolved away from Ocean's model of basically score-based payouts. Like Ocean, I can't explain your payout that well, Bob, like tides, but it's a form of like pay per last end share.
Yeah.
It's the skew on that.
Close enough for today.
Yeah. Like it's probably closer to what CK was doing, which was score per last end share, I think. It's more closely related to that, but a variation. So anyway, you know, it's a variance-based pool where you only get paid when a block's found. And what I've struggled with, you know, even with my company as it's evolved, like our customers, especially as the network hash rate is getting bigger and bigger, and their percentage relative to is not as big. They're not as open to variance in their payouts. They have bills to pay. No matter who my customer is, even if it's an oil field company, their bill is, you know, recovering the investment. So they have to get cash. And so, you know, the pool market has very much solidified around fixed payouts, around steady payouts, where the users aren't sharing in the variance. which is very unfortunate, but it's understandable given people generally don't want to suffer the cost of uncertainty effectively. But that actually is creating arguably a very easy attack surface for enemies of Bitcoin to enact different privacy controls and surveillance controls on these pools. And it's hard to say how to go in the future, but I do expect more and more licensing style, permitting style oversight by regulators on pools as the market develops. And but then again, there always exists a need for the stuff Ocean Pool's offering, and that need will rise the more the censorship begins.
Yeah, I think that's a big fear, is it becomes a capture point, especially for censorship. And I think, while nobody's admitted it to me, and I'm speaking in a generalization here, I would say to a certain degree, I think the public miners prefer it the way it is, because if we get in a world where, let's say, major governments of the world are trying to impose OFAC compliance or something similar to it, it gives them kind of a hands-off, like, hey, I didn't have anything to do with it, go talk to the pool. I'm just a hasher, right? And so, but what it does is, well, even when we use the term miner, we've had a lot of debate about this within Ocean and tried to be a little more specific about Ocean. Like, you're really not a miner if all you're doing is hashing. Like, you're a hired gun. And the reality is, you don't even know if the work being sent to you, at least the average person would not know if the work being sent to them has anything to do with Bitcoin. It doesn't necessarily have to. They just can see whether or not their payout is roughly in line with their expectation. But it doesn't mean the work being sent to them has anything to do with Bitcoin. And, as you said, Steve, yeah, we face a lot of uphill battles at Ocean, and we knew some of them going in. We've learned some, getting out in the real world and doing it, because, as you said, the world changed from Ocean is Steve mentioned it, Allegis pool, which Luke ran from 2011 to roughly 2017. And it was a restart of that pool, and now features and things have been added to that. But yeah, it's a battle, and I don't work it, even though I'm on the board of Ocean and I'm an owner in Ocean. I don't use Ocean exclusively in what we do. We do have some hash rate that goes to some other pools. A little of it is sometimes just to take that out. So instead of, like, what I do is, let's just say I had a given operation, I had 100 units going. I might have 75 on Ocean and 25 on a FPPS pool or a standard payout pool, because then I know, even if the Ocean lock happens to go through a bad patch, I have a certain amount of money that I can count on. But what I've also learned, and I run very detailed stats on this, is I am making less money on the FPPS pools, that they do not pay out like you expect them to pay out. And so an FPPS pool, which is what Steve was referring to, is kind of the steady payout. The way that most of them work is an algorithm. So what they do is they'll say, okay, a block just got mined. And let's say whether they want it or not is irrelevant. That's one of the interesting things, is for the individual miner, the luck is irrelevant. They're going to pay you one way or the other. But what they'll do is they'll say, let's take the average of the previous 144 blocks, and we'll pay you what that number should be. However, they'll throw out the high 3 or 5 and the low 3 or 5, and you get the average of the remaining. But the truth is, the 3 to 5 high ones they throw out don't really balance out the 3 to 5 low ones. There's much greater variance in the high ones and the low ones. And especially in periods where fees are really running high, that's where the payout gets a little wonky, where I think that's where Ocean, I mean, Ocean shouldn't have the advantage that it has in this, but right now it does. Like I said, my studies are showing some in certain periods pretty dramatic amount of positive variance for Ocean.
Realistically, and it's logical that a pool like Ocean should return on average a higher payout than an FPPS pool, only because if you're guaranteeing rewards, that you have to have a treasury to finance that, and there's a cost of capital there. So not only do you have to pay the overheads to running the pool like Ocean would and serving your customers, but you also have to pay off the cost of capital, which is a cost. Whereas with Ocean and any variance-based pool, that cost of capital is borne by the user. So a fixed payout pool, any of them out there, should realistically have to charge a higher fee than any variance-based pool for that fundamental reason. Some of them don't, maybe because they're very well backed. I know Foundry, for example, famously had their pool running for the longest time. Maybe they still are at zero fees. They use it as a loss leader to drive people towards other sides of their business, like ASIC financing and the like. But overall, that's not a long-term sustainable thing. What's totally degenerate, in my opinion, and that's sort of what I've been speaking to on Twitter a little bit since the start of the year, because I sort of had an idea and I've never been too interested in the pool business. I'm interested as an enthusiast, but not from a business standpoint. And I was really sort of thinking about, I've always wanted to have a pool like Ocean where, and in my case, I was thinking Brains, because at that time, Brains hadn't switched to FPPS, like fixed payouts. Yeah. They were still like Ocean, like a score-based pool, a variance-based pool. Well, I wanted to do something, and not to say this is a good or bad idea. It's probably a terrible idea, like most of mine. But I've always wanted to have the ability to either mine to a pool and be mining on their variance-based payout scheme or their fixed-based payout scheme of my choice. Like one, I can go a little more private. The other one, maybe I have to get KYC to be authorized to mine there. I wanted to do a layered pool approach, and then as I was thinking about doing something like this at the end of last year, I was reminded, which I had forgotten about. It was so long since I've been reading up on mining pools, but when I started doing research again, I remembered, there's this, I don't know if I think it's a bug, but I would call it a bug, but there's an attack vector on pools called block withholding. And effectively what that is when you're hashing, when you're mining, or if you're the guy owning the computer, you can do things like mine through a proxy, like through an interface that's communicating with the pool, but not whenever you find a block. Whenever your miner actually finds a block from the jobs that you're getting from the pool, you just don't submit the block and you throw it away. You just trash it, because you can't, based on how it works, you can't just keep it for yourself based on the encryption and all the stuff programmers understand, and I don't. But you cannot, you can basically just not submit the block back to the pool, and you can cheat the pool. And here's the thing, like if you're a fixed payout pool, like basically everyone on the market now, other than Ocean and some other names you probably can't trust, you're basically, you can block withhold them, pretend you're mining to the pool. As soon as you find a block, your own algorithm you've scripted on your proxy won't actually submit it, and you're cheating that pool out of a block, but you're getting paid the whole time. To operate a business that way is absolutely degenerate, in my opinion. Like to be, and not to pick on anybody, but like to be like, okay, I'll pick on Bitmain, like Ant Pool. I don't even know off the top of my head if Ant Pool is at PPS. I assume they are.
They are.
Never mind there, yeah. To go and build your business, allowing anyone in the market, your competitors, to join your pool with very no ability to know, like, because most pools, you can sign up, maybe you just need an email, it's a fake email. If you don't have full KYC control, you have no idea who's signing up to your pool, and they can block, withhold you, and bankrupt you in no time, because you're paying them the whole time, and they're never actually giving you blocks. It's very degenerate, and yet that's how it's crazy to me that's how the market has evolved. I understand why it's evolved that way, of course, because that's what users want. Users, in my experience, generally do want fixed payouts. They just want to know when they're getting paid and get paid. the frustrating thing, and that's why I started tweeting about it, is like I can't, even if I wanted to do something cool, which I would love to do, say with Ocean, and I build a proxy layer with Ocean backing my blocks. You know, like my proxy's mining to Ocean, and then my users who are mining to my proxy as a business, I have a treasury backing the variance that they don't want, but I'm yet all the hash rates still funneling down into Ocean, rewarding Ocean users who are willing to generate the blocks and the variance and eat the variance. But maybe I'm building a business service for my customers. I actually do that already today. I mean, upstream data, when we sell, especially with oil field, it's not so much with non-oil field, but with oil field, my customer base, they don't give a shit about Bitcoin at all. They just want a solution that pays out better than their alternative. So they'll buy our hash generators. We set them up on a pool. We've generally and historically have always just been with Brains because I'm lazy. That's it. We're just mining with Brains. They used to be variance-based payout. So I was a proxy layer to them. So that our customers got fixed payouts no matter how, once a month, no matter what we mine that month. They're still only getting proportional to what we mine, but I was sort of a business proxy layer to them. And so I would love to say, like, be the proxy layer, become a proxy layer to a company like Ocean, but I cannot because I can get block withheld by everyone and their mother if they wanted to put me out of business. Because as soon as I get someone to fund, let's say I'm a new startup entrepreneur, I want a treasury to fund this, to fund the treasury to give people fixed payouts, I can just get block withheld by a competitor at any point in time, unless I keep the pool private, which is then defeating the purpose of, you know, trying to build a business. And so you got this weird thing going on in the industry where all these companies can be effectively get bankrupted by their own competition. And some of them have high incentives to do so, like to block withhold their competition, especially the ones that have competing, like Bitmain sells miners and people use, say, Brains firmware. Well, Bitmain has an incentive to stop people from using Brains by block withholding Brains pool. I'm not saying they ever did that, but the incentives exist. And it's just a crazy. It's just crazy. That's how the pool market works. You're praying not to get block withheld, at least in Ocean's case, because they don't guarantee payouts. Them as the operator, if they get block withheld, the costs are borne by their users, not by them as the operator. And that's why they can actually sustainably run a pool, even though it might be harder to attract customers because they're not doing fixed payouts. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to do what they're doing, and I could build a proxy on top of Ocean and take that risk? So
yeah,
I don't know if I sort of explain that well enough, but it's a weird space we're in today, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, Steve, it is a very real problem, and you know, we are highly suspicious that it happens a lot more frequently than people think.
And Bob, there's really no way to detect it, because like when you get block withheld, you can do statistical analysis on what users might be not submitting blocks, and you can kick them off, but you can't really, if you're trying to be a public pool, which is what the market needs. We always need to have a public pool, because if it all goes private, then new miners are either going to get KYC'd by the FPPS overlords, or they have to solo mine. And solo mining is going to be very difficult, always more and more difficult as the network hash rate goes up.
Yeah,
so
it is.
There is a
systemic
real
problem. And like I said, we're watching for it constantly. And really all you can do, as you said, there's some technical detail, but basically what you could do is say, well, if user X is 10% of the hash rate of the pool, then over any period of time, they should win 10% of the blocks that are won by that pool. And if you start seeing a major variance of that, then you have a big problem. But at least, as you said, in the case of Ocean, it's not a price really born that's affecting this treasury, because what you find is with the payout methods of the FPPS pools is you have the block withholding problem, but you also just have the fact that bad luck happens sometimes too. And so if you don't have a massive amount of treasury, it's like Steve said, like what you have to do is, let's say you're a FPPS pool and you have 1% of the world's hash rate on your pool. Well, you're going to have to, I forgot, there's actually a study on this, but like you have to have like a treasury equal to like 6% of the world's.
Yeah, there's a paper by Manny Rosenfeld that gives a formula for what Bob's talking about.
Yeah.
It's basically.
Okay, I think I'm gonna interrupt now because of time.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Steve and I are geeking out on this, so sorry.
Yeah. That's great.
I've
learned a lot of new stuff, but it's going like way too deep now. And I know Yellow hasn't said anything today yet. I think it's because he's like fighting the 58K gang. He's like leading the 100K gang.
I'm here. I'm just watching.
I've been enjoying the conversation.
One question I need to know. I remember, or at least I vaguely believe to remember that like after every halving, there was like some minor capitulation, which would kick off the next bull run or whatever. I'm just curious for like a little short sentiment from you guys aside, is that a thing? What is the sentiment right now? You mentioned price compression like a little bit earlier. Is it like bear market vibes in the mining sector right now? Is it hard? Are we going to see like a FTX type thing in the mining space, or just shoot whatever? I'm really curious.
Well,
if we have time, Greg.
I'll start. I'll say my piece. I'm known to be a bearish all the time. It doesn't matter if we're in a bull market, I'm still bearish. But at least in the sense, like compared to your average Bitcoiner. But I'm extremely bullish on Bitcoin. I would say the sentiment is a little nervous in the Bitcoin mining sector. I know that from my own experiences with my customers and myself. Like it's hash price is very low. It's very uncertain. And I mean, I'm well known as not liking the 4-year halving pump cycle. I think it's a bunch of garbage. So I don't really base my business hoping and praying that halving pump is coming. But if it does, that's great. That's gravy. I think at least the last time I predicted price in 2020, I was thinking we'd get to like 300,000 in 2025, which people would consider very bearish. But at least I think now people would find that very happy with that projection. I'm planning. I always plan for the worst, hope for the best. So I'm planning for a tough end of this year and possibly early next year. But I remember back in 2020, and I was looking at our sales and like our customers and wondering if I would be hitting payroll. Then all of a sudden, the market flipped and things went crazy with China ban, with Bitcoin pumping. So you never know. Like, so bullish on the tech, uncertain on when.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm bearish or bullish, but it is tough. Let's just say that. Like it's a tough time to be a miner. We were never counting on a big capitulation, which I think was the start of your question. That said, if we just look at the last year or two, the amount of growth in hash rate is somewhat insane. And a lot of it's coming from companies that aren't making money. And that's the part that bothers me. It's a very fiat sort of thing that, like in a short version of this, I know we're short on time, is that the public miners are, if you look at the last 2 years of financials, they've all sucked. Like they're terrible. They do not make any money. And I think there's been this belief in the market that somehow those companies are going to grow their way out of the problem. And so, or that they were some sort of proxy for Bitcoin. And so money kept pouring in. Well, those guys, I'm speaking in general terms, in those companies kept issuing new shares, taking advantage of the fact that the market, I think, was disproportionately rewarding their stock price based on hope instead of actual performance. And they take that money, they'd throw it into new mining equipment and new expansions, and then the market would reward them even more, and then they would issue more shares, and we just had this cycle. And instead of rewarding companies that were making money, they're throwing more and more money at companies that were continuing to lose money. And I think in a lot of cases, it never forced any of these companies to become operationally efficient. They have, speaking in general terms, very high overheads, big executive compensation packages, really long build cycles. And so what we're seeing right now, in part, especially from the big guys, we're seeing hash rate come online. That was a decision made 12 months ago or 15 months ago. And that was fueled by this capital, because they're easy access to capital as well. So they can get loans, they can issue debt, they can do those sort of things. So that kind of bothers me, that instead of, we're not seeing, in my opinion, the best mining companies and the best operations growing and being rewarded, and people making prudent decisions about when to expand hash rate and when to stay put. Instead, we've seen this kind of delusional expansion.
I think you guys did a good job answering his question. So it sounds like you don't particularly expect a capitulation, but it's hard out there, and possibly the tide might come out with some financial trouble.
I think if the Bitcoin price sort of corrected down for just a little while, you would see the tide come out a little quickly on some of these, some mining companies, and sadly on really everyone in this space, including a lot of our customer base. So
yeah. I mean, if we, to Steve's point though, if we end up in a bull run of some sort, and the bull run could be as simple as we exit the year at 85, let's say, something like that. That's enough of a bull run that you'll see even the not very efficient companies get bailed out and the run will continue. But if we go into January at 58, then you're going to see some problems.
All right. So I want to make sure we get into more fun things. So we're nearly out of time, but I want to make sure that you guys get a minute to talk about what you're doing, what you're excited about, where people can find you, and then we're going to move on to the RD question. Which
No. Before that,
yeah,
I have a question for both of them. Bob, 58K against or in favor?
Oh, 58K forever, man.
Got his mic. Okay, Steve, same question.
No, I'd like to see it go up, man.
Oh, I always like Steve. I always like Steve.
All right, does that mean
I'm still believing in number go up? I haven't stopped.
That's exactly it.
Well put.
Make NZU great again.
Absolutely.
Somebody listens to his spaces.
I still like it, Bob.
All right, so Yellow, you get to choose who talks about their stuff first.
Bob.
All right. Well, at Barefoot Mining, we are trying to grow. Given all the things I've said, we're actually in the process of raising money for 3 new projects right now. All are in the gas area, by the way. And so, I do think the time to grow is when things look bleak, because we still can get great pricing, whether that's systems or some of the infrastructure products and all that. We're not fighting over other people for them. I'm helping a group called M5ers do a new ASIC. Of course, got the efforts at Ocean, and I'm also doing a project which we didn't get to do a block space derivative product. So those are my big things in the Bitcoin world, and you can find me on Twitter at boomer_BTC, and happy to hear from anybody that has a question or opportunity.
And you guys can find that in the show notes as well.
Right. Yeah. So I'm we're always working on something or optimizing something. So working on our new air-cooled product line updates, our hydro updates, a couple products for new air-cooled product lines. I got a software team now, which we've never had before, really. So we're driving towards fleet management tools. Especially, it's really relevant to us because we're building so many small distributed systems. I need better, and really no one offers anything viable for what we're doing. So we're building our own fleet management tool. And then, of course, like for those that follow me, I started in the oil field. The oil field's been still as passionate about oil field tech as Bitcoin tech. So building the company up into doing oil field adjacent things has been a huge focus for us. So we did engine machining last year. I've just started. We're about to get, it might be a few more months, but are getting into power generation, like parallel gen sets. And that'd be for both like Bitcoin mining and for oil field power generation. So trying to get the company to the next level. And when it comes to both like the Bitcoin miner market and the oil field market. And I got some US guys now. So trying to get more of a footprint down there to be more, not just stuck up here in Canada, but a little bit more political. Be nice to have two jurisdictions, two customer bases with like actual facilities in each, just in case Trudeau gets back in power and shuts us down again, like he did for a few years there. So yeah, lots going on, a lot we're excited about here.
All right. So for anybody interested, in the show notes, you can find Steve's Twitter handle as well as the Upstream Data website. And with that, it sounds like Marcus has volunteered to do our RD question. So I will shut up and let him talk.
Oh yeah, the RD questions. Hold on, let me get my notes here that RD sent me. Yeah, he has a bit of a British accent, which I'm not very good at. So yeah, Bob and Steve, if the meme factory would actually exist, which we all know that it doesn't, which one of us right here would you like? Which one would you mute? And which one would you retweet?
For me, Yellow all day long. He's my favorite meme factory guy.
So you're muting him?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No, I'm putting him on full blast, man.
Oh, he's getting a like and a retweet.
Absolutely.
All right. So who's your mute?
Oh, you can't make me answer that.
Of course I can. We make everybody.
You can mute Greg. Greg is the most muted guy on the meme.
I think I have Greg on mute.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I might have unmuted him at one point, but I'm sure I muted you at one point, Greg.
I wouldn't be surprised.
You probably hurt my feelings at one point, Greg.
I think you're one of the few people in the space whose feelings I haven't hurt yet, but I'll try harder.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I'm a target now.
What was that hurt feeling about? Curious.
I don't know. I'll have to go do some research. There's been a few people I've muted and I couldn't remember why. He's not muted anymore, so I don't know.
Probably making him read the ad reads, like today's ad read.
Well, the last one he did was Brown Street.
Today is probably better than Brown Street data. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
It was an innovation, okay?
There's no diarrhea in today's ad read, so it's improvement.
Brown Street.
All right, Bob, I think that leaves you.
All right. Well, what was it? I got retweet. I got mute. What was the other one?
Like.
I like.
A like. All right. Well, I'm gonna retweet Greg. Yeah. Only because I live very close to him and he can find me. So
it's true.
I have to worry about physical violence. So that would be nice to Greg. So I'm gonna like Yellow because who doesn't like Yellow, right? Everybody loves Yellow.
I'm trying to be the villain, and I can't. Anyway,
Yeah, well, you're the likable villain, like Mr. Evil, like in the Austin Court,
exactly.
Right? I'm really trying here.
Yeah. So, and I guess that leaves. I'll mute Marcus then. So,
There you have it.
Marcus, sorry, man.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you guys making some time for us this evening. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Cheers.
Thanks.